Welcome everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss the mid-pilot results of the NPP program launched on August 4th and now in its 5th month. While we did a mid-pilot presentation at the PTS meeting on November 16th, it was determined that it would be prudent to schedule an evening event so that more people would be able to attend. The presentation on November 16th was inclusive of data through the end of October. For tonight's presentation, I've added data through November 30th for additional context. As anticipated, the NPP program has seen strong participation figures. Recall that the current iteration of the program allows for up to 3 permits per household, where each must be attributed to a vehicle, and 1 transferable guest permit. Additionally, residents in other areas of Portsmouth are eligible for 1 permit, which also must be attributed to a particular vehicle. Stephanie, if you could put the first tile up.
On the screen.
The down arrow should hopefully.
On the keyboard.
Yeah, try the down arrow. There you go. So since the inception of the program on August 4th, the program has seen 381 regular passes issued, with 347 of those being within the neighborhood and 34 from elsewhere in Portsmouth. Additionally, there are currently 191 guest permits issued. This totals 572 overall passes, which equates to 228% of the total 251 space available parking inventory in the Islington Creek neighborhood. So the neighborhood itself, without outside influence, is upside down regarding demand versus supply. All the issues brought forward since this discussion began in earnest in 2017, the most common was the belief that it was the employees of downtown businesses that were creating issues by parking in the neighborhood and walking to their downtown jobs. In 2017, I personally observed this to be the case. Since that time, consistent with the 2012 parking principles, available public inventory has been increased when the construction of the Foundry Garage was completed, opening in October 2018. And subsequently, the downtown employee parking program was introduced, providing for a 70% discount to the $1 per hour rate offered at the Foundry. Tile 2, please. So since the launch of the downtown employee program, I'm pleased to report that the division has seen steadily increasing numbers of participants each month, even during the COVID year. Sorry for the small graph. As we emerge from COVID, a more positive outlook had businesses reopening for 2021 tourism season, which made for a more normal summer hiring season. Between spring of 2021 and August 3rd, the launch of the program on August 4th, the downtown employee program added 252 new workers for a 201% increase in users. Since August 4th, we've added 30% more. One school of thought is that employees jumped into the program in anticipation of the launch of the NPP, where you would then expect a reduction in occupancy percentages in the target neighborhood. However, an important point to note is that most of the increase took place before the program was actually ratified and did coincide with the normal increase in hiring seen at the inception of the tourism season. So outside of downtown workers, it's possible that shoppers and out-of-town visitors might also be engaged in using the neighborhood out of previous habit. If it holds that outside parties are parking in this neighborhood, creating a problem, and a program such as NPP is developed and launched to discontinue that practice, another metric to consider would be any increased use of neighborhood adjacent parking alternatives. Next tile, please. So this tile looks at pre and post launch occupancies of both the Bridge Lot and the Foundry Garage. Interestingly, the Foundry Garage peak occupancies have held steady post launch at low 40th percentile, while the Bridge Lot transactions also held steady at roughly 132%. So anecdotally, I have not noticed increased usage of the Masonic Lot located at the intersection of Miller and Middle, which is leased by the city to provide additional inventory to the nearby neighborhood. Additionally, I'm not aware that the division has received calls or complaints about rising occupancy rates in neighborhoods immediately adjacent to Islington Creek. The division has been keeping regular morning, noon, and evening counts of the occupancy of this neighborhood throughout this process. Throughout the summer of 2020, spring of 2021, and pre-launch of summer 2021, those figures were consistently averaging in the high 60s to low 70s percentage-wise. Typically in the parking industry, occupancy rates of 85% or higher are where we begin to develop strategies to mitigate demand. Next tile, please. So this tile represents data for the first 3 months of the program, where we looked at occupancy figures as they compared to previously recorded time period to get an understanding of any changes to occupancy that could be directly attributable to the program. The first line shows comparing post-launch August to summer 2021. The neighborhood saw a 0.84% reduction in occupancy, equivalent to 2.11 spaces of inventory gained, which would be defined as spaces open that were filled previously. As the program settled in, the more users posted their passes in their vehicles. September showed an additional 2.32% reduction when compared to August, equating to an additional 5.83 spaces gained. October versus September showed a 1.8% reduction as well, equating to another 4.48 spaces. So for the first 3 months of the program, prior to the start of the tourism shoulder season, the neighborhood has enjoyed a cumulative 4.94% reduction in occupancy, equivalent to 12.41 spaces gained compared to prior to the program's inception. It's prudent to note, however, that the majority of the spaces were gained at the west end of the neighborhood, where streets on the east remain very tight, but now have populations of vehicles that have NPP credentials attached. Tile 5, please. This tile graphically displays pre and post launch occupancy percentages. The biggest takeaway is that surprisingly, we did not see a precipitous drop in occupancy percentage post launch. Tile 6, please. Through November 30th, a total of 333 citations have been issued, including 41 warning tickets and 292 2-hour violations. Total collections are just under $4,000 since the program's inception. Next tile, please. So the total costs associated with the program through November 30th are currently at $46,936.84. It's prudent to note that this includes roughly $4,700 in startup costs for items such as signage, supplies, and uniforms. While all of these items do have a shelf life, they do not represent costs that we see every month, rather each year. So the remainder of the costs, however, are operational and recur at an average of $10,100 each month of the program. Last tile, please. This tile seeks to summarize the results in a single graphic. So we've seen we have a 228% issuance of passes versus spaces available with a program that allows for 3 passes and 1 guest pass. This is indicative of an inherent demand versus supply issue within the residential population without considering outside forces. In an effort to alleviate outside demand, the city built the Foundry facility and offers greatly discounted parking to the city's downtown workforce. This program currently boasts 491 members and has seen a 201% increase during the summer 2021 summer tourism ramp up and another 30% post-launch. We believe that this program has demonstrated to be a viable alternative solution to a Portsmouth downtown workforce that might otherwise choose to utilize local neighborhoods for their parking needs. We have enjoyed a 4.94% total gained inventory through the first 3 months, equating to 12.41 spaces gained that are open now that were previously occupied. However, we saw a 0% increase in Foundry peak occupancy and a 3% reduction in bridge lot occupancy post-launch. So we have not seen increased demand in adjacent parking alternatives due to the program's launch. And finally, we have $3,900 in citation revenue collections and are looking at currently $46,936.84 in associated costs. Final tile. So at this point, I'm certainly willing to try and answer any questions that you guys might have. And we've got some online folks that might want to chime in as well. So I've had it.
Well, can we talk about personal observations?
How can we ask a question?
What? Oh,
Sure.
So-
Anecdotal means the same as data. It's just a different viewpoint, for sure.
So I live on Rock Street, which is, Foundry is at the end, and there has been more availability on average, so that you can find a parking spot, which has really been, and sometimes it's fully booked, but it's really, it has alleviated, this end, and I've noticed going down Hanover, that's, the same thing. I also noticed that the people parking on Rock Street are local, like they're people that live on NPP streets, or they work, in businesses. This woman from that big apartment building, she likes to park on Rock Street, and she, I said, oh, hello, and she's, oh, yes, I love parking here, and I, blah, blah, blah. But she wasn't parking there because there was no place to park before. So, but she works on Islington, which is, included. So she really enjoys that. So it's local people parking as opposed to prior, there would be people there for, sometimes weeks because it wasn't monitored. But a lot of people would come and park and then just right downtown with, out of state license plates. So the mix of who's parking is notable. Even if you're not necessarily seeing in terms of the spots we've gained, that it's who's using our street parking is different.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I live on Rock as well. And,
Can you speak again?
Nicole up here, 44 Rock Street. Yeah, I just want to echo what Robin is saying, because previously on Rock, Hanover, Pearl, that area, it was a lot of Maine and Massachusetts plates, and you would see the same people park in the morning when they go to work, or at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, like leaving to go home. And the difference now is it's local cars that live or work in the neighborhood. I'm not seeing Maine and Mass plates like I used to all the time in front of my house.
And I do think we've had some success with the employee downtown program in EVS.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey everyone, this is Abby. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm on McDonough Street, kind of around from Nicole, by Brewster, and we're one of the houses that doesn't have any parking spots, like dedicated parking spots. So I don't know if this is something that could be part of the data, but I'm curious, like the percentage or how many housing units don't have associated spots and the relation to that. From my perspective, we came here during the pandemic. I didn't really see a problem to begin with. So we were kind of like, why are they doing a parking pilot program? Because there didn't seem, even when we moved here a year ago, there didn't seem to be a lot of demand. Obviously, my perspective is skewed because of that timing. But I do remember a distinct switch, and it seemed like a lot of the vibrancy of the community was lost when the pilot started. And I didn't really mind people kind of passing through. I didn't notice in particular plates if they were out of state or not, but it was clear that people were parking here to work downtown. So to me, it doesn't matter if they're out of state or not. But I feel like it's, now it's kind of deserted here. And to me, it takes away from the urban nature of this neighborhood. So I think it kind of makes it lose value from my perspective. And I do see a lot of time spent enforcing on our block, McDonough and Brewster. And I have also observed the conflict with construction workers. That seems like a big problem that needs to be solved. There was those 3 new houses built right around the corner, and there was kind of constant confusion over, where those people were supposed to park. So I still don't really understand if there's enough demand at this point to warrant a program like this, but it does not seem like it. I would say that, and I heard that this summer wasn't as busy as previous summers. So I don't know if that is going to take a little while to kind of build back up. Thank you.
I can speak to the numbers and that they, thankfully, the paid parking situation in the downtown area is starting to return to 2019 numbers. Obviously, 2020 skewed data because we didn't see a lot of traffic. But, I'm confident that what we saw this summer was fairly strong in terms of the entire system wide, which does then include outside areas when people seek alternatives that are free to park. So I'm not saying it's the exact same or what have you, but I'm saying that we did have strong, consistent numbers throughout the summer season.
You want to raise their hands on Zoom, then I can find you.
And please be sure to raise your hands. folks.
So,
Some folks seem
Moreno's,
to not have their virtual hands raising. I see Larry Cabal's hand, I saw a couple.
There was
Barbara,
this physical
Ken,
hand raised.
Yeah, there you go, Barbara. Yeah, Ken, go.
and the Morenos were just on screen for a minute. Who do you want?
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Charlie Moreno. This is Laurie Moreno, and we are the owners of the house at 50 Cornwall Street. And we've owned the house for over 10 years and have never had an issue, never experienced an issue with parking on Cornwall Street or McDonough in the immediate area. We have a large house. We rent it to 6 tenants normally. And as I've said before, this contributes to the workforce housing in the city, which is, we're not the only landlords that do this, but it's something that is gravely needed in Portsmouth. And the parking program immediately affected us. I thankfully working with Ben Fletcher and Peter Whalen, you were able to amend this to allow all 6 of our tenants to get permits, actually 5 tenants, but normally it would be 6. It's only fair that someone living in a house there should have a permit. It doesn't matter if the house has 10 people living in it or 10 cars, especially when you allow anyone from any other part of the city to come to the neighborhood. So that was immediately a flaw, and I want to make sure that that is understood, that discriminates against people that perhaps can't afford a house with its own parking garage or something like that. So very important. But I also feel like, this, as I think Abby had mentioned, the numbers aren't there to prove that you need this program. We never felt that it was necessary before. You're not at that 85% threshold. You're hitting 60, high 60s, 70 consistently. So why institute a program that's not needed, especially when the costs at $10,000 per month come in at $120,000 and the revenue is not even a tenth of that from parking tickets. And we just want to reiterate that parking tickets are really a turnoff for people. You heard a deserted neighborhood, but it's just for somebody to come into the city as a visitor or as a tourist and end up with a parking ticket. It just leaves Portsmouth a real bad taste in people's mouths. And I feel that Portsmouth would do so much better to put that $100,000 into a positive use, such as I've suggested this before, planting street side trees for the beautification of the city. $100,000 would plant a lot of trees, way better than sending people home with a parking ticket and a real bad feeling. It's just, and I also hear the committee talking about, well, out of state plates and people that don't live in the neighborhood. To me, that's just very insular. I don't know how else to put it. It's just, please, this is an open city. It was a seaport. It attracted people from around the world in its long history. And we're talking like this insularity that's just, I don't want to say more. I'll really launch off here, but I think you just need to think in a bigger, wider way and be inclusive. Think of people that can't afford expensive housing. And think of even just the residents, how this affects the residents. We're going to have construction work going on in our house, which I think will make it a nice place, and we need to have contractors coming. If someone has any kind of fix that takes more than 2 hours, what do? I mean, their furnace breaks down, they have to have a contractor there for 5 hours. That's a huge problem, big hassle. The last meeting I attended, my neighbor was talking about having a dinner party. And what a problem, that sounded like a big problem to have people invited. Where do they go? Once again, it's just, you're causing yourself your own negativity. And I think it's important for your committee and for the city to think in a bigger, wider way instead of just putting in parking tickets for people. It's just so negative. So please put this in a good direction. Plant trees, put it to your library, put it to your schools, something positive, please. This is taxpayer money. It's a lot of money. I would think that a lot of people would say 100,000 plus is a lot of money to be spending on something that's unnecessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Barbara or Ken?
Charlie, just for clarification, all these programs are paid for out of parking revenues. They're not tax dollars. So not that expending money is, one way or the other, but just to clarify that, it's not tax dollars. It's parking revenue.
Who do you want next? Barbara and Ken have had their hands up for a while.
Go.
Barbara, and then Ken. Wait a second, I'll unmute
She's
you.
on mute.
Larry has his hand up too, so after Ken.
Okay, hi. I'm Barbara Sadik. I live at 271 Islington Street. And I spoke once before at a meeting that was in the council chambers. And as I explained at that time, my background is in urban planning. I've taken part in one of the first of these neighborhood parking programs in Baltimore. I was one of the city planners who instituted it. This is a really weird program in some ways because we never had any goals at the very beginning. We never said, we want to reduce the parking utilization rate by X percent. We started with a program put in place when the best in urban planning and parking planning would say you don't need one. And so now all I can say is, let's get rid of this. It's a waste of money. We're not allowed here, as we did in Baltimore, to check on cars to see where they really are registered. So anybody saying, oh, it's somebody I know is local or somebody who's from out of state, that's meaningless because we really can't do good data on this, but we can look at the utilization. And so I'd like to ask the parking committee here, please, let's get rid of this. We don't need it. And thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Ken had to leave and had a comment about which we've added to the other comments. I can show you. Ken is set to run to another meeting. This program is predicted on anecdotal information. Data has never shown a need, and the latest data shows the impact of the program is minimal. I hope this shows that at the end of the pilot, we should end the program. Larry has had his hand up, and then I see Liam and then Robin. Larry Cataldo, you want to go ahead?
Yes, hello. You can hear me okay, I assume?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Listen, the parking permit problem, or I should say the parking problem goes back to the 1990s. A lot of people are new here or a few years away, or they came here during the pandemic. This was not necessarily the best time to hold a permit trial It was the only time that we had available, but we've been asking for this parking permit program for a long, long time. And the numbers were over 85%, and the city had verified that in the past. It is expected that during this period of time with the parking permit program in place, that the numbers would be in the 60s. I would expect the program to be successful if it allowed parking spaces in front of people's houses to be empty at certain times. I have an anecdotal piece of information. A local business person had about 5 or 6 employees, and they found it very satisfactory to be able to go out once in a while, especially around lunchtime, and find a parking spot nearby. They also were able to leave and come back. So it has some commercial benefit as well for our neighborhood businesses. I wouldn't discourage this. I mean, some of the residents, such as those who live on Islington Street, the program does not apply to you. However, you do have access to the side streets, and I think that's a real benefit. We've been fighting for this for a long time, and because the numbers are a little bit different during the pandemic, the entire country is affected by the pandemic, including Portsmouth and Portsmouth neighborhoods. I can assure other residents who've come here and were expecting an urban environment that every parking space, all 287 were filled during the day most of the time, especially during the summers and the fall periods when we have the most tourists. That's very unpleasant for those people who live here and need to have a parking space at least in front of their house so they can bring children into their house and groceries and other things. I wouldn't discount that. These are unusual times, and we really need to look far ahead. Peter Whalen had suggested that the problems with parking are almost citywide, and as the chair of the Citywide Neighborhood Committee, I plan to host one meeting or maybe more, and Peter, you're definitely invited, and so is Peter Rice and Ben Fletcher, to see just how serious the parking program, the parking situation is in other neighborhoods. We need to explore this. The land use boards have just given up more parking spaces. So I think that while we will see after the pandemic that things will tighten up and there'll be a lot more spaces that people really want. And all we're looking for is a chance to have a few spaces in front of our houses so we can utilize them. Thank you.
Liam, next, wanna unmute?
Hi, yes. My name is Liam Kenny. Actually, Charlie Moreno is my landlord. Just wanted to talk briefly. So obviously we've gotten help getting the passes we've needed for the house. Because when we first moved in, I mean, I think the fact that you've been limiting it to, I believe it's 3 or 4 passes plus 1 guest pass for a house is a little ridiculous. When we first moved in, we were scrambling to figure out who gets to park at what times or trying to move our cars after 2 hours until we were finally able to beg and plead to get it resolved so we can park in our own neighborhoods. I think the majority of my house, between splitting time, attending UNH, we do have out-of-state license plates, so I do think that should not matter while we're renting here. But we do give back to the city of Portsmouth for working in restaurants. I work over Jumping Jays in Portsmouth. My other roommate works at the Goat. My other roommate works over at the 110 Grill. I can go on, but I don't think that should be a legitimate issue. I think part of the difficulty is, being in a house with 5 people, we get 1 guest pass. So if we want to have, for instance, we had a little Friendsgiving a few weeks ago, and we all are in relationships, and we have to figure out, oh, whose girlfriend's going to get the pass, and we have to be on a rotating schedule. And I think, most people could speak here. If you want to have an event here, you have to make sure you clear the area after 2 hours, because we're in this zone in this parking program where even if you get your car, even if you take your car and move it 2 streets over and you're still within that 2-hour parking zone, you're still subject to a ticket by the way things are locked. So I think there are flaws with the system that need to be reviewed. That way we can accommodate, having more people over. Thank you.
Next on the list is Robin.
Hi, Robin Russo, 90 Fleet Street. Liam, you made some really great points, and this new program is a pilot program, so it could use some tweaking. I'm not quite sure why we don't have neighborhood-specific passes and it's open to all Portsmouth residents, but that's part of the pilot program and maybe a tweaking process. We at 90 and 80 Fleet Street are watching this very carefully. We live in Market Square, and it's fascinating to hear some of these new people to town. I've owned since the early 90s here at 90 Fleet Street, and perhaps they need to just observe their neighbors in the South End or downtown neighbors, because what they're saying is really, it shows me they really don't have a real understanding of the challenges that we have in Portsmouth. Now, in downtown Portsmouth, in Market Square, we have 55 Congress Street, diagonally across from 8090 Fleet Street, with no deeded parking. The Macintosh Building, which is where I live, is the very first condo building in the city of Portsmouth. A lot of people don't know that. So when these projects were passed in the 80s, there was on-street parking. And now because of the growth issue, people are scrambling and they don't have really a good sort of quality of life because of the parking situation. Also, we've got new building going in at on Court Street next to the fire station. They approved that project with not enough spaces, and we don't have enough spaces at Rockingham. So we've got a problem in Portsmouth. And also the Margison Apartments lost some parking as well with that new project. So we are watching this pilot program very carefully because our quality of life is not as good as it could be. It is a major city now, and so changes are needed. Where parking may have been easy in the 1990s, it's no longer that way. And we are competing for spaces in front of our own buildings with out-of-staters. Now, I tend to walk around the block, State Street, Porter Street. I'm like, Massachusetts, Maine, New Jersey, New York, Utah, everywhere, but we can't get into those spaces in front of our own building. Those people belong in the parking garages because we, the people of Portsmouth, have paid for those parking garages for the restaurant industry and the shops to really accommodate them. And now that we have done that, we, the people, our residents, need our spaces. And there is a good balancing act that can happen where we have certain streets specifically for residents, and then other streets will have the meters for the shops. So we're watching this very carefully. I take with me 42 units on my back that I'm speaking on behalf of tonight, that we're looking to get our resident parking in front of our building again, instead of walking 1 mile to the Parrot Ave lot in the snow, wind, ice, and rain. And when we're sick, it's only a 3-day sort of allowable time period. And if you're sick, that is in no way fun in the winter or heat. We've got elderly people in a lot of these buildings, and it's just not acceptable. And time for a change. We have grown as a city, and it's part of the growth process. So maybe some people like Lori or Barbara don't have issues with parking themselves, but know that your neighbors, and I hope you want what's in the best interest of your neighbors, because hopefully I'll be on the other side where I can help you guys get something for a better quality of life. So we're telling you, we need this desperately, not only in downtown in Market Square, the South End needs it because of the Prescott Park and the overload for those concerts. So I'm asking you to keep your heart open to your neighbors and the quality of life. I pay for public transportation, right? There's a lot of people who use it, but I don't use it, and I'm happy to because it's helping my neighbors have a better quality of life. I don't have kids in school, but I pay for it. But I want to pay for it because I want to help my neighbors have a better quality of life. And that's what we're asking from you guys. Please consider our positions and the struggle and the challenge we're having. And I think we'll make more money, to tell you the truth, if we can get those out of state plates off our streets and into the garages, because those meters stop at 8 p.m. So, and most people don't leave at 8 p.m. They go to dinner at 7, they walk around for hours. So we're losing money without having them in the garage right now. So I'm just asking you to keep an open mind and an open heart for your neighbors that are really struggling, especially I know for sure in the South End and Market Square. So thank you.
So we have 2 more people on Zoom who'd like to speak. Does anybody in the room want to speak? We have an alternate. So next is Justin Ziemba.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Justin Zimba, 446 Hanover Street. We purchased this property about a year and a half ago, so new to the neighborhood, certainly not new to Portsmouth, and have seen, you know, the growth and some of the challenges over the last 20-25 years. You know, to start, I had no delusions of, you know, always having a parking spot in front of my place. And by the way, I'm in the same boat as Abby, is no driveway, no off-street parking. So I'm you know, totally dependent on the streets here. But I was really surprised at how difficult it was. I would say most days there would be, you know, and I could tell you the specific car would park out in front, walk down to Islington, work for the day, come home at night. You know, most weekends in the evening, people would be parking there and going downtown for the evening. There were times where there was no parking anywhere close to my place. So, and they were filled again. There was people that could have got the $1 discount at the Foundry, which didn't, and they park for free on the street. But then I have to pay to go to the Foundry because there's no place to park. So certainly challenging. It was a drastic improvement when this pilot went into place. As Robin and Nicole said, you know, there isn't always parking there, but the people that are here are the people in the neighborhood. I do believe that having, you know, the 2-hour limit, yeah, there are definitely people that park here short-term, run, grab a coffee, and that's great. I think that allows for visitors. It allows for people that want to have a friend over for a bit. So again, you know, I think this has been a really solid improvement. The other thing I'll mention too is I'm glad that Peter had mentioned this in the beginning. I do think that there's a big difference between the west side and the east side of the West End or of this neighborhood. I think there was a gentleman at the last meeting that talked, I believe he lived on Hanover Street, a little bit closer to town on Bridge. That street is almost impossible to find parking on. It's a much different situation down at that end than it is, you know, a little bit more west. So again, I think this has been a great improvement in quality of life. I'd certainly recommend, you know, doing any tweaks that we need, but moving forward with it. Thank you.
Karen Pollard.
Hello, thank you. I have lived on Islington Street on and off since 2014. And I'm currently at 51 Islington, which does have its own parking lot, very fortunately. But that doesn't mean I always have parking available to me and have not only had tickets, but even had my car towed from various locations. And this parking program has been very helpful to me and for my daughter and my 2 grandchildren who visit me on occasion from Massachusetts, and my son. And what I felt it was a tremendous improvement. I agree that I would prefer to see people who live here have first option, but I would not throw the program out rather than just fix the things that could be better about the guest permits. Again, I have one permit for a guest. I do not abuse that permit. And I think it's wonderful that I can have my children and grandchildren visit on occasion and use a space close to me rather than have to park at one of the garages and have to go pick them up in my car. Again, supposing I can get back into my other space. So I do hope that the program continues with whatever necessary improvements can be made on the guest permit side. I do hope, and by the way, it was after my car was towed that I was even told about the program when I moved in to my current location. I used to be at 314 Islington. I'm currently, like I said, at 51. And that parking has always been a challenge, but I think this has been a big improvement. I hope we can improve it further and keep it in place. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everybody on Zoom.
My name is Elizabeth Ferrer. I'm a property owner at 159 McDonough and 342 Cabot. I lived in the neighborhood for 35 years. And for the last 5 years, I've been in the neighborhood every single solitary day, a minimum of 3 to 5 times a day, because I'm the grandchildren transportation person, and I often have spent lots of time in my own house, even though I don't live there anymore officially. I think all cars, the halfway point originally when the program came out was supposed to be a time to recognize and look at what the different issues are and maybe work on resolving them and putting them into place to see what worked. So in November, there was a complaint about the guest permits. You can get guest permits, for those of you who don't know. If you're going to have a little shindig, you can go down to the parking garage and get guest permits for your shindig. From 6 o'clock at night until 11 o'clock in the morning, you can also park without having to worry about getting a ticket if you time it right. You have to do the timing right, otherwise you'll get a ticket. I have no permit, and I come to many meetings in downtown Portsmouth. I've walked over to the city hall to do research. I've gone to the library for meetings. I've done all kinds of things, and I've learned how to work around the 2-hour parking and how to work around parking at night, the last area around. Some of the things that people talked about, I believe that the parking guest permit situation has been straightened out to make it easier for people to do that. It would be nice if cars that are legally registered to an address or a landlord can say definitively that they are a tenant by looking at the lease. Those people should be able to get a resident pass. The issue with contractors is an interesting one, because we have a total of 4 houses being built on our end of the neighborhood. One is at 200 McDonough Street and one is 41 Salem Street. And because the contractors don't want to pay $35 a day to park down there, they've been very, very good about keeping themselves in a small area. A lot of times when things are being built in your neighborhood, the contractors kind of spread out all over the place. But because of the parking program, they've all been being more concise about how many trucks they bring in. They've been more concise about trying to utilize the space on the property where they're working. So I think the contractor situation does need to be looked at. There are some issues with it in regards to being able to get a 5-day permit as opposed to some when they're building, they need a lot more time than that. But that would be something that perhaps the city could work out with contractors. I think that a lot of people have gotten tickets, and this has been shared with me by a lot of neighbors, that they have tinted windows, and the tickets come about because the people doing the ride-alongs, as I call it, are not able to see the passes, and then they give them a ticket, and it turns out they had a permit all along. So either the permits should be moved to another location, or they should be put on a location on the car, maybe on the front windshield, or they could be put on the outside if the permits were weatherproof. I know some schools have their permits on the outside because a lot of kids have tinted windows. So, but they use a different sticky, so I know that makes a difference in terms of that. So generally speaking, I personally have found that now that the program is in place on the west end, where my properties are, I am able to come in at any time of day and find one space within the same block as my buildings. In the past, I would walk up to 3 blocks, sometimes 4, or sometimes I would park at my other property on Bartlett Street and then walk through VC and cut through the back railroad tracks to get to my property on McDonough Street. So generally speaking, that number of 12 spaces seems low to some people, but the 238 Deer Street begged to get a parking dispensation for 12 spots, which they got. And when I think about 12 spots, that's 1 spot on every street. There's about 15 streets in that neighborhood, and 3 of them, I believe, have very limited parking on them, some have none. And I think of those 12 spots as a minimum of 1 spot on each street. And the way I look at that 1 spot is that allows someone to run to the grocery store and come back with their groceries and be able to park and go in their house and do that. And before, a lot of people could not do that. People were found walking 2 or 3 blocks with their groceries because they couldn't park close to their house, not even in front, but close to their house. So personally, I think the program is working. I think it does need to be tweaked. And the parking tickets are not designed to pay for the program, in case anybody thought that, or the city would have gone out of their way to come up with more ways to give us tickets so they could pay for it. But the tickets are not to pay for the program. They are just to make it clear that when you're in the neighborhood, you're gonna get ticketed if you don't park properly, which was a huge problem before. We had parking on Cabot Street. We would have, Cabot Street has, on the very far end down by the railroad tracks, is a total of 4 spaces. And we would have cars in the middle of the street parking 2 deep, and you couldn't get out once you got in there. So the illegal parking has gone down tremendously, which has made our neighborhood much safer because the fire department can now actually drive down there if they need to. It's also made people aware, the tickets make people aware that they are in a neighborhood parking permit area and they should get one. There are a lot of signs there. There's no reason why somebody shouldn't know that they're in a neighborhood parking program. If they don't read the signs, it tells you they're not paying attention to the road. So those are my points. I think that realistically, I think the program is moving in a positive direction. I love all the feedback. I'm happy so many people came. Even if it's negative feedback, it still tells us something that might need to be looked at in the program that could be changed to make it a more pleasant program for everybody. Thank you.
I'd like to add something if everybody's had a chance to speak. And hearing what people were saying about, giving parking CUPs in new developments and all of that, that the city is giving away parking, which is compounding the parking problem, or maybe even created the parking problem that we're seeing. Coming up in developments, we have the Stades building, which is 21 micro units with 0 on-site parking. They got a CUP to not have to provide any parking on site. So that's like 21 cars. They're gonna buy a parking permit, a paper parking permit, $100 a month, or they're just gonna go right next door. I mean, it's not even, it's the same distance, and park in our neighborhood if we don't have an MPP. The Whale Wall building, which is gonna be the new home for Novacure, great, it's great for having, this kind of development. 300 employees. And because they're a business, they don't have to provide any on-site parking at all. 300 employees. There is some underground parking. I have no idea how much, but they do not, because they're a business, they do not have to provide any parking. There are many other examples. I'm not going to spend time, but there is an issue, and it's only going to get that much worse as I mean, as we grow, and we are growing. So it's like, do we wanna throw in the towel on this, or do we wanna tweak it so that we can make as many people that are using the NPT, make it work for as many people as possible? Find out what the rub issues are. Let's figure out a tweak so we can help people figure, these things out so that it works for people. I mean, that's the goal, that it's gonna work for the community.
While I was sitting here, I was thinking, wow, I've been following this issue since my oldest son was a baby. He's 13. And something I learned through the process of the pilot getting instated is that it's a give and take. I remember in the beginning, in my own mindset, thinking like that it had to be so rigid, or it should only be residents. And through the process, I really learned that, you know what? Having employees park in the neighborhood, it hasn't been a problem. Like opening it up to Islington Street, someone spoke about how that really made a difference in their life. All the accommodations that were made have not been a problem. So I think that was important for me to learn. It's a process, and like, several people have said, clearly any process and any pilot needs to be tweaked. I mean, when Liam and Mr. Verona say, look, X amount of people are living in a house, of course they should, if they have registered vehicles to that address, of course they should be eligible for a permit. And I think one of our neighbors, I read the notes from the morning meeting. I mean, I don't know why they have 6 cars, but they do, but I feel like if you have a registered vehicle and you're paying a registration fee on it to the city, yeah, you do deserve a permit. And would that throw off the balance of what we have going on? No. So I think there is room for more accommodations. And that's something to think about. And maybe like, would giving people more than one guest pass, would that ruin this? I don't think so. But if you were to just, as Robin would say, throw in the towel, like with the amount of growth the city has seen and continues to see, like when she said 300 employees that will abut our neighborhood, if you take this program away, come on. And the thing I have always said is that since the Foundry Garage has been built, it's like never in my life have I seen something so absurd. You have a parking garage abutting what used to be free parking. Who would pay to park there if they didn't have to? It's so absurd. And with the amount of growth that's happening, why wouldn't we want those people, these new employees, encourage them to park in that garage? That's revenue for the city. And a lot of these jobs are, I think, you've made a lot of effort to make the parking affordable. And I would argue some of these jobs, I'm sure they're well-paid jobs, as opposed to, like Liam was saying, he and his friends working in the restaurant industry. That can be trickier, I understand that, but there were a lot of people parking in the neighborhood that they weren't working at a restaurant. They were working 9 to 5, and I'm sure they were making quite a bit of money, and they just chose not to pay for the parking because they didn't have to. And I'll make one more point. What's interesting to me is the people who I've noticed that who live in the neighborhood and have spoken opposition of the program, they seem to live in the middle of the neighborhood. Because on Rock Street, when you go like Pearl to Bridge, that area, the occupancy prior to the program being instated was much higher than other parts of the neighborhood. So there is this gap in the middle, and I don't think those people understand what people on Hanover were living with, like one gentleman spoke about. And then I think people that abut Liars Bench, that end, I think they were getting slammed by, employees of, Liars Bench, and maybe people, day drinking on weekends and stuff. So there is this little gap in the middle that I don't think they're seeing the whole picture. And I'm not sure how that gets resolved. But if you just throw this program out, you are just restoring an enormous problem that's only going to get worse with growth. And then I'll be staring back at that garage, 26.2 million garage, going, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I think a lot of hard work has been done, and obviously through Ben's, and the people that work with him. I mean, they're working really hard to track the data and are diligent. And one thing, Ben and I were speaking at National Night Out this summer, and Ben said, it's not about giving people tickets, it's about changing people's behaviors. And I can say that has successfully happened. I've seen that with my own eyes. And I say that with, there is room for more accommodations, for more adjustments.
Barbara has her hand raised again. Barbara, you want to go ahead? I'm blocking you.
Okay. Yes, I find all of these comments very interesting. It seems like we are talking about continuing a program because it's good for downtown. Well, maybe downtown should have a program, or it's good for the South End. Maybe the South End should have a program. We should continue this program because maybe there'll be 300 spaces. But I also heard that there was an 85% occupancy when the city is seeing a 60 some odd percent occupancy. And I wonder if that 85% occupancy came about before the Foundry Garage. I think the city is being really successful in getting people to use the Foundry by offering those kind of parking programs for city employees. And I just think that this program right now, maybe it was needed before the Foundry was built, but we don't need it now. We don't have the data to support it now. And we're paying lots of money for something unneeded. So I still say, let's find better use for our money. That's it.
Robin has her hand up again. Robin Russo.
Hi, I'm listening to the comments. One point that some people are missing is, and the word workforce housing keeps coming up, and we obviously like to deal with that and have affordable housing for people in the restaurant industry, of course, but those people cannot afford the garage. Hanover Garage is $200 a month, and Foundry, I guess, is $100. They can't afford that. That's like a car payment to them. So to have on-street parking with like whatever the annual fee is, $25, this is for your workforce housing people or elderly people on a fixed income. Those are our neighbors. Really, not everyone has a $500,000 house in the city of Portsmouth. So really, we need to take those people into consideration for on-street parking and have a reasonable parking arrangement for them. So sometimes we just throw numbers out as if $100 to $200 a month is no big deal, but it is to a lot of people who do not make all that much money, but service us in the downtown Portsmouth area. Also, if you want, take a look at Washington, DC resident permit parking program. I really liked the way they deal with contractor permits. It's just seemed very simple and easy. I've also lived in downtown Boston, where if you have a commercial plate, they really don't bother you. And I think there's a certain number of hours you can park there. Maybe, I think it's like a 9 to 5 situation. Let them, right? I mean, let them park there for 9 to 5 with commercial plates. So there's a lot of, like we said, tweaking, and I'm just throwing these things out to put on the table to consider. Thank you.
So I'll make one comment to Ms. Russo. The Foundry Garage does have a program for downtown employees that offers parking at a 70% discount to the $1 an hour rate. So downtown employees are eligible for 30 cents an hour parking at the Foundry Garage at this time, and we have almost 500 users in that system. So we're very proud of that program. I believe it's taken a whole lot of pressure off the surrounding areas.
Everybody online?
So we appreciate everybody coming out. Obviously this is
Yeah,
a check-in, and we're continuing to gather data, and at the end of the day, we'll report back to City Council, and everybody will have the opportunity to voice their support at that time. So it's, I really appreciate everybody coming out. I see Abby Krishner
And also the Morenos.
as well.
So,
The
Kathy,
Marinas can go ahead. They were waiting longer.
Oh, no, go ahead, Abby.
Something Barbara said in her first comment, like understanding the original goals for the program, I think for me, as I still consider myself somewhat of an outsider, would be really helpful just so I understand it. Like, I think I've lived in New York where there's nothing like this. And, you never have the expectation of having a parking spot in front of your house. You expect when you have groceries that you're going to walk. So I think it's also some of that expectation that is misaligned. So I'm curious from the data perspective, what are the goals?
So to speak to that, as stated before, typically you're looking for an 85 or above % occupancy to start to take action to reduce occupancy and change behaviors. As a whole, this neighborhood sees in the low 70s, and so a measure would be a significant reduction from that figure, and a measure would be a significant increase in users surrounding areas like the Bridge Lot and the Foundry, which unfortunately we haven't seen. And certainly a measure would be anecdotal thoughts from the folks that live in the area. So that last part being obviously subjective.
Morenos?
Hi, thank you once again, Charlie Moreno. And a few of the takeaways for me tonight, some really excellent comments all around, is that this does seem to be very neighborhood specific. Also, I feel like the committee is all pretty much very much in favor of the program. They're all set that way. And I think one of the take homes is that, yes, there are, if this program is to stay, that there are tweaks needed, and that what is that process? Can you get some of the persons that are not in favor of the program in your committee, at least, or somehow get an outside voice that also sees the other side of the issue, so that you end up with a more moderate program rather than one that's skewed in one direction and is going to be unsatisfactory to a larger group of people? I think you need it, as with everything, it's compromise. And as much as we are not in favor of the program, we don't feel it's necessary, at least for our little area. I totally support what some folks are saying in other parts of the city. Downtown, absolutely, it sounds like it's necessary, but the numbers don't speak to the need in our area. Anyways, if you are going to have a blanket program, compromise is necessary. Make sure you hear the other voices and bring those into the process, please.
Well, certainly, Charlie, that's the reason for tonight's input meeting. I want to stress that the group in front of you, aside from Peter and myself, we're all just folks that are joining in the conversation. It's not a panel of any type that is a group of members that is making the decision. In fact, the decision needs to be made whether to extend this or not around early February by the city council. And at that point, each of you that has an interest in public speaking and voicing your opinions, thoughts on the program, will have the opportunity to then sway the council's opinion on whether or not to extend the program beyond the original 6-month pilot. So I wanted to clarify that what you're seeing in front of you is not necessarily a panel at all. It's just a bunch of folks that are interested in the process and wanted to make their voices heard, just like yourself. You just don't happen to be here in person.
So just one clarification, the chairman of the Parking Traffic and Safety Committee is here right now, Peter Whalen. And Peter, if you want to speak to this.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. What's going to happen next is obviously you're going to have a new city council come in January. Parking, Traffic and Safety will continue. They'll elect a new chairman. So this will come back to Parking, Traffic and Safety, probably for some tweaks. I'm not sure how many more months we have to go on the program. Yeah, I think it was February, March, somewhere in that time frame. So what'll happen next is parking, traffic and safety. I'm assuming whoever the new chairman will be discussing it. And then a recommendation will be passed on to the city council. And you have a new city council, so I would lobby them for either for or against or what you want to do. The only thing that I would just, one of the reasons why Islington Creek was picked, or the neighborhood, was that they had the infrastructure and the program was almost ready to go, if you know what I mean, where other neighborhoods in the city were. So it was looked at as kind of a great way to try out everything you needed to do with the neighborhood parking program and figure it out. And fortunately, it's worked for some people, and for some people it hasn't worked. I know I had some conversations with you, and we were trying to accommodate you and the tenants in the house, and I think it all worked out okay. But in Portsmouth, we need to keep the dialogue going. There's always going to be a debate. I've lived here for 30 years. It took us 20 years to build a new library. So these debates are going to continue on. But what a lot of the speakers have said tonight, the city is growing. You've got a new corporate building being created in downtown with 300 employees who are going to be there. You've got Mark McNabb's project over on Court Street, which is going to be office building, and they don't have to provide any parking. You've got the new Portsmouth Housing Authority building that took away 170 spots. So parking is going to continue to be an issue in Portsmouth. So I would just, I would say we all have to work together and try to figure out what is the best for all our diverse neighborhoods in Portsmouth. And I would just like to compliment Ben and Peter for doing such a great job. This is not an easy job. Parking is, a very touchy subject in Portsmouth. And, Ben and his crew have done a great job thus far. So I would just encourage us to keep the dialogue open. You're going to have a new city council coming in, in January. They may have some new ideas or different ideas, but, we just have to work together. The parking issue is not going to go away. And we just have to work together as a community to figure it out, for our residents and do the best thing. So with that, I'd like to compliment Peter and Ben and thank them for all their support. And I noticed that we've got a couple, Mary Lou, you're on the listening. So we've got a couple people for parking, traffic and safety, the committee listening to all the comments. So hopefully that first meeting in January, they'll be discussing this. So thank you.
Thank you for your effort, all your tourists here, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
We're going to have a work session where all the different people with different viewpoints and different can just sit down and say, well, what if we do this and what if we do that, and to tweak it before the end, instead of, is there a way to make some changes to see if we can accommodate, everybody as much as possible, everybody's needs in the community, to see, because that's the goal of a pilot, is to try and tweak and change. And I haven't seen, other than select changes, like to accommodate 6 people in a house, I haven't seen any changes or tweaks, through the process. So I would love to have a work session that everyone can attend, and everybody, say, look, how do we solve this problem that I'm having with this program? How do we adjust this? And so that it's a work session and everybody has their input, and so we can try to brainstorm solutions. So I would request that.
I hear your request.
Thank you.
It's a policy decision.
Yeah.
So, it'll bring it up to the next parking, traffic and safety committee. It can be voted on. It could be as part of that committee. It could be something that the city council votes to do. I view this as a work session. To me, we got a lot of good feedback. We got some ideas. I'm comfortable, so far what we've heard.
Yeah, let me add one thing. I know I've had some discussions with Declan McEachran, the new mayor-elect. He's very in tune to this parking issue. So, I would reach out to Dagland, and I think they could schedule a work session. So,
That's what it's all about. I don't know what this other person's issues are, and they don't know what mine are, and just so we can work together, collaborate. Instead of having different views, and then we don't know what happens, and there's no changes, so.
okay.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming tonight, and thanks for the opportunity to discuss the program and have a impromptu work session as well. And looking forward to continued discussions, see how the program plays out over the coming weeks. And I hope everybody has a great night. Be safe and healthy.
Thank you all.